The grand ballroom at the plaza shimmered as if the chandeliers themselves were in on the celebration. Golden light spilled over velvet drapes, catching the soft glint of crystal glasses. A jazz quartet played in the corner, the upright bass thumping steady while muted trumpets curled around the room like smoke. Sterling Financial's annual gala had always been a performance of success, a stage where everyone knew their role. Mine, after 11 years, had always been to smile politely, keep conversations light, and avoid the politics that swirled like an undertow beneath the champagne. Camilla Duval stood across from me, framed by a circle of executives. Her sequined gown shimmered like a lure, her laughter perfectly timed to land just before her next Instagram story. When our eyes met, I stepped forward, glass in hand, and lifted it in her direction. "Can't wait to see the big news you've got coming," I said, letting the words carry just enough warmth to pass for harmless courtesy. Her smile faltered just slightly, but enough for me to see the fracture. Then, with her back angled toward the group, she leaned toward her uncle, the CFO, and murmured something I almost didn't catch over the music. "She's been digging, hasn't she?" The words threaded through the air like smoke. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard right, before I could parse it. A waiter glided past, silver tray in one hand, and with the other slipped a small folded card into my palm, so discreetly it might have been a sleight of hand trick. I lowered my glass and unfolded it beneath the table's shadow. 5 words, block letters in black ink. "Leave now if you want to keep your badge." My gaze swept the room. Conversations carried on, but eyes flicked in my direction too often, their focus breaking the easy rhythm of a party. Camilla had turned back to her circle, laughing again, as if nothing had happened. Her uncle didn't glance my way at all. I slipped the card into my clutch, the paper's edge digging into my fingers as if to remind me it was real. The champagne in my glass had gone flat, or maybe it was just the taste in my mouth, somewhere beyond the velvet drapes. I knew. The real game had already begun. I joined Sterling Financial 11 years ago, long before the gala invitations came printed on thick linen stock and the champagne never stopped flowing. Back then, the office smelled faintly of toner and burnt coffee, and the servers hummed in the corner like restless animals. My title was Forgettable Senior Systems Analyst, but my work wasn't. Over the years, I built what would become the company's most valuable asset, a $2 billion audit control system that could spot a misstatement the size of a rounding error and lock it in place before it could metastasize. When other departments crumbled under scandal, mine held the line. During 2 market dips and 1 near collapse, my system didn't just keep us afloat, it made Sterling look untouchable. I was the invisible scaffold no one toasted to. Camilla's entrance was different. She didn't arrive with code under her nails or the weary focus of someone who had spent nights buried in data. She came in on a wave of glossy press releases, introducing a fresh face to leadership. Her promotions came fast, propelled by her uncle's pull and the company's appetite for polished optics. She thrived on photo ops leaning over spreadsheets for staged shots, touring branches with a camera crew in tow. The first time I saw her name on an internal memo, it was attached to a quarterly report full of buzzwords and blank spaces where substance should have been. Still, no one called her out. At Sterling, image often won over integrity. And then there was the thing I never spoke of the night 3 years ago when a critical entry error from the CFO himself threatened to ripple into a shareholder nightmare. I'd found it at midnight, scrubbed it clean, and patched the ledger before dawn. Only the CFO, myself, and 1 compliance officer knew it had happened. I told myself it was loyalty, not complicity. But loyalty is a fragile currency in a place where debts are repaid with suspicion. As I stood in the ballroom tonight, the waiter's warning card still in my clutch. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had unearthed that buried night and was about to turn it into a weapon. The elevator doors slid open onto the 54th floor, the air sharp with recycled chill. Sterling Tower's crown level was all glass and angles, the Hudson River stretching beyond like a promise meant for someone else. A junior manager I barely knew waited just outside the lift, hands clasped tight, and guided me down the hall without a word. The conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows threw the city at my feet. Camilla sat at the head of the table, her sequined gown replaced with a razor-cut blazer. Two assistants flanked her, their nervous glances darting between me and the polished mahogany surface. "Close the door," she said, not looking at me. I stayed standing. "What's going on?" She swiveled toward me, her eyes cool and deliberate. "What's going on?" she repeated slowly. "Is that you just breached company protocol? No one hires you to predict the future." "Lillian, your little remark tonight wasn't clever. It was a breach." I almost laughed. "It was a congratulation. Camila. That's all." Her hand sliced the air, shutting me down. "You're not important enough to have opinions outside your spreadsheets. Know your place and stay quiet." Each word landed like a gavel strike. From the corner of my vision, I saw the CFO's shadow cross the frosted glass wall, but he didn't come in. Camilla pulled a document from a leather folio, uncapped a pen with surgical precision, and signed, "Effective immediately," she said, sliding the paper toward one of the assistants. "Broadcast this to the internal channel. Let the team know what happens when people forget their place." The assistant hesitated, then tapped at a tablet. Somewhere below us, hundreds of notifications lit up screens. I felt the sting in my chest but kept my face still. I gathered my bag, smoothed my jacket, and met Camilla's gaze. For a fraction of a second, she faltered, searching for something in my expression that I wasn't about to give her. I turned, the glass door whispering shut behind me, and stepped into the quiet corridor. My reflection in the polished elevator doors was calm, composed, already charting the next move. The cold night air outside Sterling Tower hit me harder than I expected. Slicing through the composure I'd worn upstairs, I stepped to the edge of the plaza, away from the revolving doors, and that's when my phone vibrated in my hand. Tier 3 surveillance mode activated. The words bloomed across the screen in stark, perfect font. My breath slowed. That line of code had slept, unnoticed, for nearly a decade, buried so deep in the system's architecture no one but me knew it existed. It wasn't sabotage, it was protection. My protection. Years ago, in my second year at Sterling, I'd watched my mother's life unravel in real time. She had been weeks away from retirement when her small pension fund collapsed under the weight of an accounting scandal. The executives walked away with golden parachutes. My mother walked away with nothing but a box of keepsakes and an eviction notice. That winter. I promised myself I would never again stand powerless while someone else rewrote the numbers. So, when I built Sterling's audit control system, I wrote in an unassuming clause if my credentials were revoked without due process. The system would lock down and initiate its own defense. It would scan every ledger, every shadow entry, every buried amendment, and anything flagged as suspicious wouldn't just be saved, it would be replicated and dispatched through encrypted channels to the Federal Audit Oversight Commission before anyone could bury it again. The alert on my phone pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and sure. Somewhere inside those steel and glass walls, my code was already moving locking gates, tracing fingerprints across the financial architecture, compiling the story the company had worked so hard to hide. I slipped the phone back into my coat pocket, the weight of it comforting. This wasn't about revenge, it was about leverage, and if the system did its job as I'd designed it, leverage was exactly what I'd have, behind me. The city roared on, oblivious to the quiet war now running in Sterling's servers. I turned toward the street, letting the tide of pedestrians carry me into the dark, knowing the clock had already started ticking. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was already lighting up with chatter from the inside. People who usually avoided me after hours were suddenly sending cryptic messages, half warnings, half questions. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened my secure admin feed. The system logs told their own story, less than an hour after I walked out. Camilla had convened IT in the Executive Operations Hub. Their first attempt to generate an audit summary had ended in a blunt red banner. Verification failed. They tried again. Same result. The protocols I'd built demanded not only my digital signature but my live biometric confirmation for final report validation. Without both, the system refused to certify anything. A small smile pulled at my mouth as I read the failed attempts stacking up, but it didn't last long. Another notification cut through the feed, one that had nothing to do with Sterling servers. From DK. Bureau heads up. CFO just called in a favor. Wants any incoming audit data flagged and held. You're on someone's radar. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of those words settling in. The CFO wasn't wasting time. He was trying to choke off the pipeline before my evidence could land where it needed to. I typed back quickly. How long do I have? The reply came in seconds. Depends who he gets to first. I stared at the encrypted progress bar on my screen. The failsafe was still running its sweep, encrypting and dispatching in bursts. Once those packets cleared Sterling's network, they'd be almost impossible to intercept, but until then, they were vulnerable. I knew the CFO's reach. He could make a call and freeze a file mid-transfer, all under the pretext of national security. My only advantage was speed, and the fact that my contact in the bureau had just put me 2 moves ahead. I closed my laptop, already mapping my next steps, the city's hum outside my window syncing with the pace of my pulse. The encrypted feed opened with a grainy flicker, then sharpened into the familiar angles of Sterling's war room on the 52nd floor. It was a place few ever entered, secured with dual keycards, retinal scan, and a logbook that read like an exclusive club guest list. Camilla sat alone at the central console, her blazer draped over the back of the chair, sleeves rolled up. Her face was lit by the pale glow of multiple monitors, eyes fixed on the figures spilling down the screen. I watched her cursor move with surgical precision, zeroing in on the Q3 losses. Line by line, she buried the truth. A 320 million shortfall vanished under her keystrokes, redistributed into shadow accounts, glossed over with fabricated revenue streams. Each command she executed left a trace in the system, a breadcrumb trail the Oversight Commission would follow straight to her desk if the data made it out intact. The feed captured everything the set of her jaw, the slight tremor in her wrist as she confirmed the final override, the glance she cast toward the door, as if half expecting someone to walk in. She didn't know she was already being watched. I toggled the camera metadata. Access granted from within the room. Less than an hour ago. That wasn't standard. Feeds in restricted zones required manual activation. Out of the 5 people with clearance, someone had turned it on and left it running. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, mind parsing the possibilities. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe someone had forgotten to shut it down after a legitimate check. Or maybe, just maybe, there was another set of hands in this building quietly working against her. The progress bar on my secondary feed ticked upward, 43% of the fail-safe sweep complete. Every second Camilla sat in that room was another layer of proof. I saved the video file to 2 separate encrypted vaults, redundancy drilled into me from years of crisis planning. On the screen, Camilla leaned back, exhaled, and closed the ledger as if the crime were already buried. I knew better. The numbers she'd tried to kill were already coming back to life. The war room feed faded into the background as another alert pulsed across my dashboard. Investor briefing commencing. Level 1 access link available. I tapped in. The secure stream opening to the boardroom on the 53rd floor. 30 stakeholders filled the space, their tailored suits and measured expressions a mask for the billions tied up in Sterling's balance sheets. The CFO sat at the head, Camilla to his right, shoulders squared in a navy power suit that looked borrowed from someone else's authority. A presentation slid onto the wall-sized screen, quarterly results polished down to the decimal. But when the lead analyst attempted to finalize the validation, the numbers refused to comply. Report validation failed, blared in red across the display. At first, the room was silent. Then murmurs began, low and sharp, like a hive disturbed. The analyst tried again, fingers trembling. Same error. On the far wall, a second screen lit up with the live stock ticker. Sterling's share price twitched, then dipped. 1.36. The slide was fast, visible, and irreversible in the eyes of the watching market. Someone demanded to know if this was a glitch. Another asked if the data was uncertified. Then the main display flickered, the red banner dissolving into new text, evidence submitted to Federal Audit Oversight Commission. The words hung there, stark and undeniable. Phones appeared in hands, headlines already spilling onto screens as the leak rippled through the press. The CFO's face tightened, his gaze darting to Camilla. Her jaw was locked, but her knuckles whitened against the tabletop. He leaned toward her, speaking low, too low for the microphones to catch. She didn't answer. The boardroom was no longer a place of business. It was a cage filling with panic. Some directors turned their questions toward the CFO. Others simply stared at Camilla with thinly veiled satisfaction. I watched him weigh it, protect his niece, and let the company bleed, or cut her loose to cauterize the wound. His indecision was its own verdict, and the silence around the table grew heavier with every second. The call came less than an hour after the investor briefing imploded. A private number, the kind only circulated among the board's inner circle. "Miss Prescott," the voice said, clipped and urgent. "We need to talk. Now." They didn't ask where I was, they simply sent a car. 25 minutes later, I was back in Sterling Tower, walking into the same boardroom that had once been the scene of my dismissal. The air was heavy with the stale scent of panic and expensive cologne. Camilla sat rigid at the far end, her uncle beside her, his face drawn tight. The chairman wasted no time. "We need that system back online before the markets open. Can you reverse the lockdown?" "Yes," I said, "but not for free." A ripple passed around the table. I set my bag down and leaned forward. 2 conditions. First, Camilla resigns effective immediately, and it's public. Second, the exclusive service and licensing contract for the audit control system transfers to Prescott Systems LLC. Maintenance, security, deployment rights, everything. Camilla's head snapped toward me, eyes flaring. The CFO started to speak, but I held up a hand. "This isn't negotiable." The chairman's expression didn't change, but his fingers tapped once against the table. Before he could respond, a director 2 seats down spoke up, his tone oily. "Or we could come to a different arrangement. You keep the evidence between us. We grant you a generous equity stake in Sterling. Silent partnership, steady payouts, no public mess." I let the offer hang there for a moment, scanning the faces in the room. Then I shook my head. No. If I take that deal, I'm no better than what I've spent my career fighting. The win has to be clean. Silence stretched until the chairman finally nodded. "We accept your terms." I pulled my laptop from my bag, fingers already moving over the keys, credentials loaded, protocols unlocked, and the heartbeat of Sterling's network began to return on my terms and under my name from the 53rd floor. I could see the lobby's glass doors flare open, even through the paneled windows. The scene was unmistakable flashes bursting like lightning as reporters shouted over one another, the crowd pressing forward for a shot. Camilla emerged first, flanked by 2 security officers. Her oversized sunglasses couldn't mask the trembling set of her jaw, nor the way her shoulders hunched against the onslaught. She didn't pause, didn't wave, didn't spin the story like she had every other time a camera found her. The exit wasn't a walk, it was a retreat. A few paces behind, the CFO followed, his face pale, the calculated confidence I'd known for years, stripped down to exhaustion. He didn't look at the press. He didn't look up at the building that had been his fortress. He just kept moving, one hand on the revolving door until it swallowed him whole. The boardroom was quieter now, though the air still carried the tension of what had just been done. I sat at the polished table, the leather folder open in front of me. $2 million annually, the chairman said, tapping the contract. Exclusive rights to the system. All yours. I read it again, though I already knew every word. My pen moved steadily across the signature line, the ink a final seal on everything they had tried and failed to take from me. When it was done, I closed the folder and stood, crossing to the window. The crowd below was still buzzing, cameras flashing as black cars pulled away from the curb. From this height, the chaos seemed small, but I knew better. The ripple would spread through the markets, through the industry, through the lives of everyone tied to Sterling's name. My reflection in the glass met my gaze, calm but not complacent. Control was mine now, yes, but the feeling was different than I'd expected. It wasn't a finish line, it was a door, and I had only just turned the key. The Park Avenue office was everything Sterling's boardroom had never been: quiet, uncluttered, and mine. From the 38th floor, the East River stretched out in a silver ribbon, the morning light catching on its surface like a moving mirror. Prescott Systems' logo gleamed discreetly on the glass door behind me, but my real pride sat in the stack of incorporation papers on my desk for something entirely different. The Prescott Alliance for Financial Integrity nonprofit, independent, and already seeded with the first year's licensing revenue from Sterling's contract. Its purpose was simple: provide legal and financial support for whistleblowers in the finance sector. I knew too well how easy it was to be silenced when your livelihood was the lever they used against you. This was my way of cutting that lever in half. I'd spent the past week lining up the advisory board former auditors, compliance officers, even an ex-federal investigator who had once been on the other side of my firewall. Every call I made seemed to end with the same tone of relief in the other person's voice, as if they'd been waiting for someone to make this move. A soft knock at the door pulled me from the contracts. My assistant stepped in, holding a plain manila envelope. "No return address," she said. Setting it in front of me before slipping out again, I opened it slowly. Inside was a single photograph, the war room's camera control panel, time-stamped from the night I'd watched Camilla bury the $320 million shortfall. Stuck to the panel in the picture was a yellow sticky note, scrawled in black ink. "You're not the only one who believes in the truth." For a moment, I just sat there, the photo balanced in my hand. Then I felt it a quiet, steady smile. It had never just been me. Somewhere inside that building, someone else had taken a risk, left that camera on, made sure the story didn't stay buried. The alliance wasn't starting from zero. It already had unseen allies. I set the photo beside my desk phone and looked back out over the river. "They told me to stay quiet," I murmured. "Now my silence speaks for thousands."